Okay, everyone, we are going to go ahead and get started with today's webinar, which we are so excited about. So today's webinar is hosted by our CodeMonkey team of ambassadors. Paige, do you want to go ahead and skip to the next slide there? So before we get started, just be sure to follow us on all of our social media platforms, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook. You can also check out our CodeMonkey blog, which the ambassadors will share about here at the end, as well as on LinkedIn. You can also tweet at us during today's webinar as well. Next. Okay, so today's webinar is moving from block-based coding to text-based coding, led by our team of teacher ambassadors. And so I will let them introduce themselves in just a minute. But we just want to thank you so much for joining us for today's webinar. Our CodeMonkey ambassador team and the CodeMonkey team as well wants to thank you so much for, Paige, we go back to this one, for joining today's webinar. We know that obviously this last few years has been anything but normal. But our goal today is to share teaching tips and strategies from the ambassadors themselves from going through the pandemic and just some different strategies and takeaways and tips that they learned throughout this time. So if you have any questions, please feel free to pop those in the chat box, in the Q&A section, and also you can tweet at us during today's webinar as well. If we don't get to your question during today's webinar, we'll make sure to send you a follow-up email as well. And at the end of today's webinar, you'll get a survey link, and the survey link, once you fill that out, it will give you credit for today's webinar. Who doesn't love some PD credit, right? Okay, next. So we're going to get ready to write code, catch bananas, and save the world today. So I just want to introduce myself. My name is Lena Saleh. I have been with CodeMonkey for 3 years. Prior to that, I had taught in the classroom for just a little over 10 years. I am the professional development and sales manager here at CodeMonkey. You can always reach out to me on my Twitter. And I also do have my own personal YouTube channel, so feel free to check that out as well. We're just lucky to have you. So thank you guys so much for joining us. And I'm going to let our two ambassadors take it away.
Hello, everybody. My name is Javier Aguilar. I'm the pre-K 5th grade teacher for East Fort Worth Montessori Academy in Fort Worth, Texas. I love to use coding resources, and one of my favorites is CodeMonkey. I'm an ambassador since 2014. And also I do after-school clubs using CodeMonkey and other resources for robotics and coding. And so I love to share with you today my journey from how to using it, some of these resources the CodeMonkey offer for educators, for elementary students, started from 1st grader to maybe to 5th graders. Okay, thank you.
Hello, welcome everybody. I'm Paige Besthoff. I'm from New Jersey. I teach elementary school, digital technology and gifted and talented grades 2 through 5. And my mission is to provide all students with access to computer science and STEAM. So we're going to begin our webinar with our objectives. Go ahead, Lena.
Okay, so today's webinar objectives, we'll go ahead and cover this, but as you guys know, over the pandemic, it was thought that, well, not during the pandemic, but just over the last few years, coding was once only thought to be used for those older students, but the pandemic, just using the text-based, coding languages, but the pandemic, I think, brought a new perspective to all of you as teachers, and just as you start to take more risks and things with coding itself. So we're excited for our teacher ambassadors to share those. So today we're going to go over using block-based coding languages with young learners. We'll cover the block-based courses of CodeMonkey Junior and our Beaver Achiever courses. And then we'll discuss using text-based coding for those upper grade levels of students and through the Coding Adventure, Space Adventure, and Banana Tales courses. And just before we actually get into going over this slide itself, we are going to just go ahead and take a quick little poll here. We'd love to just see what grade levels you're working with, and then just kind of how familiar you are with coding itself. And then we'll go ahead and go through this. So we'll give you just a couple of just about a minute or so to go ahead and take this poll here, and then we will get going with the rest of the webinar. All right, so it looks like the majority of you had a chance to vote. So I'm actually going to share the results with you. So hopefully you can see the results. You can see that majority of you do teach the upper elementary and middle school levels there. And that some of you are sort of, you know, in the middle with coding. And I think that's kind of where we all are and where we hope to kind of share those experiences with you today. So we're going to go ahead and take a look here at our courses that we do offer here at CodeMonkey. So we kind of have a spectrum. We suggest grade levels K through 8. Obviously, these courses can really be adjusted for where your students are, their needs, and their previous coding knowledge. So you can see here, we move from block-based to CoffeeScript, and CoffeeScript is a shorter programming language. Basically, it's not very syntax heavy, doesn't have a lot of curly brackets and things like that. We know that young learners, even more advanced learners, don't know how to put periods, right? Don't know how to spell their name, you know, capitalize their names, those types of things. So giving them extra syntax like curly brackets and things just tend to confuse them. So this gives them the opportunity to learn those text-based languages, but without having to be tied down. And then we move right along to our Python. So we'll kind of review a few of these courses with you today through the ambassador's point of view. So yeah, feel free to ask questions in the chat box.
All right, so I'm going to start by going over what is block coding. So hopefully some of you have experienced some of the block coding applications. So blocks introduce students to coding concepts without the need to know how to type. So students also do not need to know how to read, which is a huge help. They can just follow along with what's going on the screen, and they can drag blocks into the correct location. The blocks at the youngest level are arrows and symbols, and here's a picture here that show direction. So as students move to the higher courses, the blocks then will have words and symbols. So students at even the earliest age are introduced to the fundamental concepts of programming, operators, loops, and events. So they think that they're playing games and they don't really actually realize that they're learning. Okay, so two of the block-based programs in CodeMonkey are CodeMonkey Junior and Beaver Achiever. And we're going to begin by taking a look at CodeMonkey Junior. So CodeMonkey Junior has friendly characters, as you can see by the graphic, fun graphics, and students love the sounds and interacting with the characters. Okay, so for non-readers or our youngest students in pre-K to first grade, although my second grade students love CodeMonkey Junior. So these are the concepts that are covered. Okay, so I'm going to give a quick demonstration of what CodeMonkey Junior looks like. So I'm going to go into the CodeMonkey account. And right here is our CodeMonkey Junior. And again, it's marked as pre-reader. So the students do not have to know how to read. And then they can see here that the monkey wants to get to the treasure chest. And then they can just take their blocks and drag them up. They press start or run, and here, and there is sound, but I don't have the sound turned on at the moment. So, and of course,
We can hear your sound.
Oh, so I can't hear my sound. Okay,
Oh.
so he's hopefully it's not too loud. So he's celebrating. So
No, it's the perfect volume.
Okay, so then Here's a sample of some students playing. You can do it on a tablet. I don't have tablets in my school, so we use them on Chromebooks. You can use it on regular computers. While we were home during virtual learning, my students were able to use it on almost any device. And of course, you can project it up on your smartboard if you have one. Okay, the next one that I'd like to talk about is Beaver Achiever. So Beaver Achiever is perfect for the 1st and 3rd grade. Although depending on students' reading level, I definitely have older students that have used Beaver Achiever. So I've used it with my 4th grade and some of my 5th graders. There are some words here, but there's also the arrows and symbols. So even though that the students are introduced to words on the blocks, they don't need to be able to read them. So I've had anywhere from 2nd graders use Beaver Achiever all the way through to my 5th graders. Okay, some students need to start with block coding in order to become motivated and persevere. So if they find that they're successful early on, it encourages them to continue and progress with the harder levels. So again, even though my students are older than that 1st through 3rd grade, it gives them that motivation and that level of success. So if they know that they're successful, then they'll be able to go onto the text-based coding. Okay, Javier.
Yes, like mentioned it, Paige mentioned it, there's Beaver Achiever and CodeMonkey is a good starter for little grades. I using it personally with students the first time when I used CodeMonkey Junior, as similar to Scratch Junior, but it's more helpful, more engagement, and I see the how the students enjoy it. So I really like it. Like mentioned it, the first time I see it is only available in iPads, so in iOS systems, but fortunately, the CodeMonkey always receive feedback from teachers and from anybody. They want to improve something. So they improve it and they open it for any system. So any Chromebooks, any Windows systems, desktops, laptops, telephones, and everything. So that is very helpful. So the next one, like I said, Beaver Achiever is very helpful as well too, because it's different. It's working with sounds, music, and everything. So students love it. So I witnessed my students come, how they challenge, how they solve it. And I really enjoy to do some kind of leadership skills in my class. So when the students mastering, I ask them to give you, not the solution, but give you some clues to the students' struggle to give you like kind of teamwork. So that's I really want to improve that one. So you notice here in my class, I have my upper graders, this is 3rd graders in my school, to assist me to go visit 1st and 2nd graders when we have enrichment on Fridays, to go one-to-one, a student 3rd grader to 1st grader to teach them how to use the system. So I believe so it's a great tool, a great teamwork that you can maybe challenge your students, 3rd graders, to teach the little ones, to teach the kinders, to teach the 1st graders. So I promoting leadership in my school. And this is another example how my students engage in on Fridays enrichment. I do robotics and also do coding classes using CodeMonkey. And you notice here, they have 3 stars also for to see it, you have complete successfully the challenge. And this is an example how the Beaver Achiever works. You drag in your blocks and click the green arrow icon to move it. You see, this is something that I introduce my students to segmentation. Don't try to solve the problem at the same time, do it by steps. So you little by little students start saying, oh my goodness, that's true. So if you give you the option to start the problem, solving in little pieces, students can be understand the best concept. And also at the same time, you introduce to them how to use the loops. Remember, you can have a big lines of code and you can reduce it when you use the loop. job. That's good. So another thing that really empower my students said, the computers are not the smarter, you are the smarter, because the computers, they can do anything without give you some directions. So that is something that my students all the time ask, I can do it, or they struggle, or they are sometimes frustrated, but I said, no, take your time, let's do it together and try to do the solution. Remember, you encourage your students, failures are okay. There's nothing wrong with the failures because we learn in the failures.
All right, so now we're going to move on to text-based coding. So text-based coding is when students begin typing in directions instead of dragging in blocks. So in Coding Adventure, which is the sample shown here, students can also click on these buttons that are down on the bottom, and then they're still prompted to enter additional information. So for example, if they click the step button, they'll still have to type in how many times they need to step. Okay, since text-based coding follows syntax rules, as Lena had mentioned earlier, the curly cues and periods and some arrows and dashes and things like that. Okay, so they are still being familiarized with real world programming. So students are able to challenge themselves by having to type the code and not just know which blocks to drag. Okay, so again, here is an example of Coding Adventure. So once my students in second grade completed, this year they did CodeMonkey Junior, they completed Beaver Achiever, and then some of them actually got to move on to Coding Adventure. So again, second grade, and these are students that I did not see the first half of the year. I didn't even get to meet most of my second grade students until almost March or April. And they actually were able to go in and learn how to do this. So just because it's for third grade and up doesn't mean that you second grade students can't get challenged. Okay, and here my students work collaboratively so they can help each other when the code becomes difficult to master. So this slide here is pre-pandemic, but I do have some other slides with pictures showing how they worked during last year. But they do work together collaboratively so that they can help each other. And again, not get frustrated.
Yeah, there's something like Paige mentioned it. The Code Adventure is targeting grades 3 to 8, but you can adapt it for any grade level. The challenge is 420 challenges that are divided in 3 courses. 210 challenges are story mode or concept introducing challenge to another students. Programming language using CoffeeScript. The coding concepts cover is Code Adventure is using loops, objects, variables, arrays. For loops, the Coding Adventure 2, they use more advanced information for coding, like functions, conditions, Boolean logic, if else, for example, and or. And the last part of this Coding Adventure is the using operators, like no comparisons, function, return values, triggering events, using the mouse. So it's a great complete course. So I highly recommend it for graders. The other one they want to talk right now is Doodle Maths. Doodle Maths using, okay, this one is, okay, this is Coding Adventure.
I was going to show real quick Coding Adventure.
Yes.
So just so you could see what it looks like. So this is Coding Adventure Part 2, and you can see that they're still typing in. It's a little bit more complex, but they still are able to click on the buttons to help them move along. All right, go ahead, Javier. Sorry for.
The other program they're using in my class is Dots Math, because this is some crossing curriculum, the coding, or in this case, CodeMonkey using it. to reinforce it, what is students doing with math. And you also can ask the students, you using math is important in coding because they're using subtractions, using divisions, multiplications, and also use geometry like angles and everything. So for example, I remember as my students, so remember how you symbolize your multiplication when you're writing. So you put a little X in computers, so you need to define what is multiplication with the asterisk. So it's need to learn these concepts because they cannot be said, you know what is multiplication is different when you represent it in a computer when you made it in writing. So, but it's a great resource, great resource for reinforced math. This is targeting for 2nd to 5th graders. They contain 20 levels. And Dodo's Math offers students fun game-based challenge that will help them practicing from 2nd to grade mathematics concepts. Banana Tales is another great resource or great course from CodeMonkey because allows students to create their own games, to be creative. Because remember, the students, they need to understand, they only know how to play, they need to create, they use their imagination, they use their creativity to learn. And the use is more like I said, for advanced classes, and they have 75 challenges in part 1. And you see it, they have you working with the statements, loops, variables, arrays, indexing, and for loops. The part 2, they use class variables, scope input, and also dictionaries and 2D lists, bubble charts. How I can incorporate Python in K5 to K-5. I have a GTS students that all the time help me with my classes when the students struggle when I teaching coding. These students using right now the program in Python. Python is another program similar to JavaScript, but they really want to see it. You need to challenge your students when they want to expectation is higher and say, you know what, Mr. Aguilar, I want to learn something else. So don't stop the creativity for the students. I really encourage them to go to move forward to learn more advanced. I believe so the Python is teaching more like in the middle and high schools, but it never start early. I believe so you create a great foundation in elementary, it's gonna give you better skills for the middle and high school.
Right, so this is a picture of my class during the previous year. So here I have students, this particular class here, you could see that this was this year, that they're socially distanced, they're wearing masks, but these young ladies who are here, they're actually standing up and working out the way that they should be moving. So my students, they look at the challenges and then they act them out. So this way they can physically figure out what to do. And again, even though they weren't near each other, they were still able to collaborate. So someone had asked earlier in the chat about pair programming. So this is not true pair programming, which is one device and 2 students. However, they are working on the same challenges at the same time. They discussed what are they going to go into, which one are they going to work on, because I let them choose. And then they actually work together and they turn their screens and show each other what they're working on. So even though we were in person, we were able to do that. Now in the front picture over here, this is another program that we have on CodeMonkey. It's called Space Adventure. It's part of the Hour of Code. And my 2nd graders, not all of them, but some of them were able to work on this challenge as well. And it also, the 2nd through 5th graders worked on it. So here you could see in this picture that I have students who are at home, so they were learning remotely. They're sharing their screen here, asking for help. They're working together remotely at home. And then the students in the classroom here in the back, they're also able to go and help each other. And so they walked around the room, just like Javier said, that they were able to assist their classmates. And then even remotely, what I had my students do is if everybody at home wasn't able to help each other, that one student who is in class would come and stand in front of the camera, the webcam, and they would go through it and help the students who were at home. So this, again, they shared their screens and then they were able to assist them. So it's very, very collaborative, really lets the students be able to work together. Okay, one of the other things that I did was I created this poster. It's called Tips to Help with Frustration. I have this hanging in my classroom. I also have it on my pinned on my Google Classroom page, because students really know that they shouldn't give up when things get hard. And these are some of the tips that I tell my students to use. So we in computer science do something called rubber ducky programming. So here's my little rubber duck friend. So my students don't all have rubber ducks at home. So one of the things I tell them to do is, if they're at home and they can't talk to a partner, they can't actually speak to somebody in class, if they're working from home, is to talk to a stuffed animal and try to work it out with just by thinking through the process. So CodeMonkey also gives hints. So what they can do is keep track of what they try, write it down, describes what's happening, and think about what should happen, and then go through and try to make some changes. Okay, Lena, I think this is you.
Sorry. So you can see here, and Lori, I agree with you, Paige always has great tips. So some of the concepts that are covered within each of these courses really kind of range. So I know each of them mentioned, different things. The CodeMonkey Junior is really computational thinking. Those lesson plans in that course are really my favorite. So we have the Beaver Achiever, and you can kind of see the sequences here. I'm not sure why this is my error here. There's really only 3 courses in Beaver Achiever. There's 115 challenges that we just recently expanded, and it's going to be enough content for more than a year for your students there. Coding Adventure goes pretty advanced. It starts out pretty just really teaching those fundamentals, and then it gets into more advanced concepts like Paige had shown, where they're defining functions, they're doing some Boolean logic, and then they really get into like event-driven things that are being triggered. So when I push this key, what happens? So really just moving into those more advanced concepts. So beyond challenge 75, it moves pretty quickly and gets pretty advanced there. Dodo Does Math, if you do teach at the elementary levels, which it looked like a majority of you did, the favorite one that I like to use is the Dodo Does Math angles. You pick up a protractor and you actually measure the distances. When I was in the classroom and I had students that were struggling, I actually utilized this course with them. It was the first time that they really understood what an acute and obtuse angle was, and kind of just really understanding that measurement in a more visual way. So it was nice to see those kind of light bulbs go on as well. And then Banana Tails, Javier mentioned that he uses this with his younger students. Anyone who's a little bit more seasoned, I guess you would say, in the coding programming language could do Banana Tails. We've had younger students do it as well. But just if they're not so familiar with it, it can get a little bit frustrating when you don't know those sequences, how do you do the syntaxing correctly? So we always want students to feel ownership and feel excited about that. And so that's kind of what we try to encourage throughout all of coding, throughout all of the courses itself. And like Paige mentioned, Space Adventure is our newer course, but probably one of our faves.
I just wanted to mention, I do a lot of cross-curricular work with because I'm a technology teacher, but I bring this into the regular classrooms. So when Lena was talking about the angles, when my students were learning quadrilaterals in the 3rd and 4th grade classes, they use this Dodo Does Math as the reinforcer, and a lot of Coding Adventure as well. So when they were first learning how to use protractors in their math class, they then reinforced it by using the protractor in Coding Adventure and also in Dodo Does Math, so which is really, really helpful. And again, I think that we mentioned it earlier, reinforces those typing skills. So even though that, in the text-based coding, they're practicing, well, where are the letters on the keyboard? Where are the numbers? How do I find it? Where are those brackets and things like that?
Yes. And what was I? Never mind, I lost my train of thought. I think what I loved, Paige really led and created this webinar for you all today. What I loved most about Paige's story is I think what a lot of us kind of come into when we start teaching coding is when your students kind of come in with no computer-based knowledge, we sometimes feel that maybe they can't achieve. We get nervous about them achieving at those higher levels and kind of taking those risks. So I think what was really great is, Paige's students, the first time they ever see computers or any type of thing is when they come to her classroom and they're, are they first grade, Paige? Or
second grade. Yeah. We don't have any devices K1, pre-K1 at all. So their first device they're seeing is second grade. And
so she started using Beaver Achiever, right? Paige?
With the second grade, we started CodeMonkey Junior. Yeah. I let them start on Junior because they didn't even know how to type their names.
And I think, I think what Paige has learned from this year and what I love about her story is just that she was able to see, what the students were able to achieve without really, this year it's not like you were sitting right next to most of your students. They were really kind of achieving it and have to doing it virtually and kind of taking those risks. And I think that's always the hardest part is taking the risk when you begin coding. So I think that's what's so special about both of our ambassadors and really all of you is that once you start really getting into coding itself, you just see what the students can achieve. And I really do think it ties to also just like regular achievement in their classes. They're able to see how to sequence and really kind of tie that into other components.
Okay, if we have a little bit of time, so I think I'm going to show them the teacher dashboard.
Okay, yeah, sure.
Okay.
Sure.
All right, so
and then we'll take some of these. We have a couple of live questions. So why Paige is getting that up and going. We had a question from one of our participants. Are there any paired programming lessons in the curriculum? So there are a couple of the lessons, some suggestions for students to work collaboratively. But I think as programmers, I don't think that there's anything wrong with students sitting side by side and programming together. I think the important piece is that they each do their own so that they can be accountable for their work. Because if Javier does my work for me, I'm never going to know how to do it independently. And so we just always kind of encourage that collaboration. And I think Javier does that a lot in his classroom with his students as well.
So over here is the full teacher before I was showing you the student version. So here, if you go to teacher resources, you'll see that there's a bunch of different tabs. My favorite one, especially when I was brand new at this and I had no idea what I was doing, especially with the coffee script and the Python, was the solutions. So as the teacher, I'm just gonna go to one at random, one of the higher up ones. It will show you what the 3-star solution is supposed to be. So as a teacher, you don't have to ever feel that you don't know what you're doing and not to do it. So don't, you as a teacher are a facilitator or a lead learner, you're learning alongside with your students. So this is here to support you. Again, there's also lesson plans. So you can download, I'm not going to click on them to download, but you'll see that you can download lesson plans for all of the different activities. There's how-to guides, setting up classrooms, adding students. If you do any of the Hour of Code challenges, so again, my favorite, one of them was, where is it? Here, so the banana tails. If you want to try out the Python banana tails just for yourself, you can try it out as an Hour of Code activity. Just so that, because again, I don't know any Python until I tried this out. So here it gives you more information about it, how to set up a whole hour of code. So this might be something interesting to do during Computer Science Education Week this week. You show them something completely different. Okay, and this you can definitely do. My 3rd graders were even able to do that. So those are some notes, certificates for your students, and some posters and things like that.
Something that I really want to reinforce you guys, the dashboard help you to see the students' struggles, the students' achievements, what is students, for example, it says, you know what, I see everybody is struggling in number 8 challenge, let's go discuss so you can present it. And so from that, have a conversation with the students and I see what is the struggle to reinforce them to everybody understand. So you notice there, they have little stars and you see the little blue screen. That means they have a challenge. So they have problems with that. They give you a little graphic perspective. What is your students doing it? And of course, you can see what is students already almost finished everything. So you can ask this student in particular, you already mastered that. So you can be my teacher assistant in the class. But remember, as your teacher assistant or your student, they help you, don't give you the solution, only give you some clues. Because like Lena and Paige agree, we are here to reinforce every student learning at the same time. So it's not good to give you the solution right away.
Also up here, if you notice, you can turn on or off the hints and you can limit their progress. So maybe you only want them to learn how to do the stepping and turning, or only work on challenges 1 through 10 during that class time. So you can, and then for grading purposes, for those of you who need to give grades, you can click on the export data and then have their grades. There's a grade book here as well, tells you what they completed, gives you a list of your students, their sign-ins, and again, you can assign lessons and then see the lesson plans. So maybe I'll try to see if I can open that up just so you can get an idea. So here's the lesson plans are all here in slide format. And your objectives, your vocab, your standards, and gives you step-by-step instructions how to teach the course.
And the introductory part of those lessons, it does have usually an unplugged type of an activity. So that's usually introducing to the concept. And then there's some playtime, which is the bulk of the lesson plan itself. And then the last part is debrief. So usually reflecting on something that you've learned throughout the course. And I know Paige had mentioned that she used CodeMonkey Junior with her 2nd grade students. I always love to use this with really any of the students because there's not really any barrier to entry. There's not a lot of text tying them down. It's really fun. And it just kind of gets them going. And the lesson plans in CodeMonkey Junior, the unplugged activities, those ones are my favorite, especially for like the younger kids that has a lot of movement. And I know that we don't really know what this year is going to look like as the pandemic rages on. So it's always just, you can always take those also like virtually as well. So here on this slide here, we have our CodeMonkey blog, which I had mentioned at the beginning, but we do have both Paige and Javier have both written their own blog posts here on why coding is important and best websites to learn coding. I don't know what happened here with the formatting there, but both Javier and Paige also lead our monthly Twitter chats. And so we hope that you can also join us for those as well. And then we do have a CodeMonkey super fans group. It's really our CodeMonkey PLN group. And we do, we really want to encourage you to collaborate as much as possible because that's the most important piece of teaching anything is just the collaboration that you can have, not only that you encourage with your students, but amongst yourselves as teachers. I'll answer this one question here. One person asked, does CodeMonkey still have the computer science competition? Right now, we don't have the competition in place, but we do have some things in the works that we're hoping to be able to share with you all soon. Barbara had a question, and maybe you and Javier can answer this. For students with no coding experience, 4th and 5th graders, would you recommend beginning with CodeMonkey Junior?
Absolutely, correct.
Yeah, go ahead, Javier, you can answer.
Yeah, absolutely. I believe so. This is a great start because they're gonna start moving the easy challenge, and they're gonna be moving to a little more harder challenges. So maybe say, no, CodeMonkey Junior is easy, so move it to a Beaver and Cheever. Beaver and Cheever is a good example because we're gonna be started with the easy lines of code, but they're gonna be introducing them to using the loops. I believe so. They made it in segmentation and reinforce them to how to do it, but you don't lose anything. If they like it, maybe they finish all CodeMonkey Junior and then jump into Beaver and Cheever.
Yeah, I absolutely think that it gives them the motivation because they started with something that's easy to them. They say, oh, this is so much easy. This is fun. If you start them on something that's a little bit complicated, sometimes they get turned off and they don't want to try extra hard. And especially this year, they're going to find so many things challenging that give them something that's going to be easier for them to feel really good about themselves.
And then the next question was, can the lessons be assigned through Google Classroom? So all of the coding adventure lesson plans are adapted in our lesson mode. And so those can be, as long as you're basically, if your accounts are synced as a Google account, then you can go ahead and you can connect that right to your Google Classroom. So we do have that ability there. So great question. So we would love to go ahead and open this up to next page. 2 questions for you. I know some of you have been popping in questions as we've been progressing here, but it's always nice to hear directly from you any questions or wonderings that you have. We have these 2 great resources here. Really, we want to honor your time and your questions just as much as the information that we've been able to share with you today.
The questions could be anything about computer science, remote learning, hybrid, in-person learning. I spend a lot of time, my big focus in my classes is collaboration. It's really important for me that my students are able to work with others.
So what are some ways, Paige, that you have been able to foster collaboration with your students? Because Paige is in New Jersey, so it's been a little bit different rules, obviously, in every state and every county and every place. So I'd love to hear your perspective on how collaboration worked for you and your students.
Yeah, so as I mentioned a little bit earlier, that my students, even though that they had to socially distance, and as far as I know, they will still have to be 3 feet apart in September, I still want to make sure that they're working with others. So if they're in the classroom and they're not able to actually work together, I let them work with a partner that sits nearby. I can't control where they sit, so I can't choose their partners. So hopefully what I try to do is have one student who's really strong at reading with a student who's not as strong at reading when we're working on the text-based. And it's not always my best students who are the best at computer science and coding. Usually my best students are the ones who get frustrated first because they're used to being good at everything all the time, and they really have to think about this. This is not something that just comes easily. The block-based coding might be more intuitive, but the text-based coding, they really need to pay attention. So those students, especially in the upper grades, I know I constantly tell my 4th and 5th graders, we start, if you're referring to yourself with the letter I, it must be a capital letter I. So they need to know that it's very, very specific, that they have to type things correctly and they can't just wing it. So I really try to pair my students based on their learning styles. That being said, if they're not, whoever they're sitting next to, hopefully their classroom teacher has already fostered that kind of collaboration within the math and the English ELA classes. So they're able to already have a partner. But if we were under normal circumstances, hopefully at some point this year, then I just have my students, they work by whoever they'd like to work with, and they really do collaborate together no matter who they're working with, they work together. This year, my 2nd graders would just flock to each other, whoever was on a different, whatever lesson they were on. And again, my second graders went all the way up through Coding Adventure 1, which was amazing since they had never seen any technology before.
Javier, you have students in your classroom that speak also different languages. Do you find that there's anything that prohibits them from learning how to code with being different? You also have a different language as well. So would love to kind of hear your perspective there too.
Yeah, I believe so. Coding is universal, so you don't need to learn Spanish or read in Spanish or read in English. So have the concept, have the base. I believe so. Understand the real. So my students that are learning visual learners like me, so when you show them the first exercise together, they catch it right away. So it's the language is not barrier for them because they already see it. It's like in math, 2 + 2 is 4. So it's the same concept when they're using in coding. I see the students and say, oh, I got the solution. And sometimes they find it different ways when they don't use the loops, but at the same time, they reinforce them and understand better when the keyboarding is important because like Paige mentioned it, sometimes they see the parenthesis is almost the same like the bracket or the curly bracket or the square bracket. But when I mention it to using it correctly with the shift key, how important is to understand how the shift key works. So they see, visualize and say, oh my goodness, that's the problem. So good or bad, you are starting introducing then the concepts and say, this is debugging. You're looking right now a bug. Oh, what is bug? So sometimes they joking with me, is a flight there or is something that I say, no, it's something like you finding something wrong in your program, something wrong in your coding. Let's find out. That is the concept for debugging. Oh, I got it. So I'm explaining the history of the debugging. One is this Miss Hopper, when they're learning that, they're learning about this little bugging. So these concepts, the students already learning in early stages because my goal is to prepare them when go to the middle school and maybe despite the interest in early ages to continue learning computer science in the future.
That's great feedback. Okay, so it doesn't look like there are any more questions, but just know that you can always reach out to any of our ambassadors. You can also reach out to anyone of our team. You want to go to the next slide, Paige? So obviously from all of us, we thank you guys so much for joining us for today's webinar. Next slide. And like we said, if you have any questions, you can always reach out to info@CodeMonkey or follow us on any of our social media platforms, really almost all of them, even though every day there seems to be new ones, right? But we hope that thank you again, Javier and Paige, for taking your time, and for all of you teachers for spending your time with us today. And we hope that you remember to write codes, catch bananas, and spread the word. Bye, everybody.